I am willing to bet that if you got yourself a D7, you felt a little bit disappointed when you took it for off-road riding. And the reason behind that is that this bike isn't properly equipped to do any off-road riding right out of the dealership. It comes with soft suspension, street tires, an awkward soft brake pedal, and a really small friction zone for the clutch. So on this video we're going to see what are the best upgrades that you could do to your bike so you could enjoy a little bit more off-road. Let's get into it. So first off, we're going to divide this in two categories. First is going to be the necessary upgrades that you must do if you want to enjoy your bike off-road. And the second one is going to be the optional upgrades that you may or may not want to do. So for the first category, we got tires, brake pedal, suspension, and the clutch lever. Regarding the tires, this bike comes with the Pirelli Rally Scorpion STR, and I'm guessing STR stands for street. I went with the Pirelli MT21 Rallycross for two reasons. One is price. Most of the tires for adventure bikes are around 300 bucks or 250 or 200, but between 200 and 300 bucks. And the reason I went with the Pirelli MT21 is that it's a third of the price. They only cost 100 and 120 for each tire, so that's a really good starting point. The second reason I went with these tires, it's because they have a much more aggressive design. The knobs are much taller and there are wider spaces between each knob, so it's really good for off-road and traction when you want to control your bike on difficult situations. Just like this dirt that we have right here, it's really loose gravel on top of hard bike. So this is my go-to tire when doing off-road in this kind of scenario. The second upgrade that I went with to enjoy a little bit more off-roading is a brake pedal. I went with the Camel Adventure The Fix brake pedal, and what it does is it changes the leverage ratio so you don't have to make a large movement in order to engage the brake. What that means is that you only have to tap the brake pedal in order to actually stop the bike. With the original brake pedal, you had to push down and hopefully the rear brake would engage. At least that was my feel. So if you want to enjoy your bike on technical situations and not be wondering if you're braking or not, this upgrade is totally for you. The third upgrade is suspension. And on this one, you're probably going to be thinking, well, I don't want to spend a lot of money in order to upgrade my suspension. And you don't have to. I made two simple fixes to my fork, to the front suspension of the bike. The rear shock, I would say it's okay. It could be better, but it's okay for now. But the front fork, the front suspension, it's really soft and it's kind of unstable at higher speed if you're doing off-road. If you're doing consecutive bumps or going through rocks, you don't want your suspension going all over the place or diving under hard braking. So the main two things that I did to my fork is I got stiffer fork springs and I changed the oil for a thicker oil with higher viscosity. That allowed me to, one, have the better sitting position of the bike. It sits higher on its travel with the stiffer fork springs. And with the thicker oil, it allowed me to really control the compression and rebound of the bike, of the front suspension. So the two things that I did to my forks is that I went with the K-Tech fork springs. I went with the 6.9, I forgot the unit measure. I'm not saying that you should pick the same fork springs, but you should look into what's best for you. For example, what I did, I went into the K-Tech suspension calculator that they have on their webpage, and And what I found was they were recommending me the 6.3. The problem was the 6.3 fork springs. I forgot the unit measure. The problem was that they didn't have that measure here in Chile at my dealership, so at my local dealership. So they only had the 6.9, and that's what I bought. And I don't regret it at all, actually. I really liked those fork springs. They make my bike sit much higher on its travel. It's really stable, and that's what I went for, and I totally recommend that. If you weigh around 80 or 85 kilograms, or 190, 180 pounds, you should be fine with 6.9 unit measure fork springs. The second thing that I did to my forks was I got thicker oil with a high viscosity. This forks originally comes with the KYB G10 oil. It's probably a Yamaha G10 fork oil. And what I did first was I increased the viscosity of the oil 50%. And I quite didn't like it. And I went then with the 100% increase. So I went from 36 centi-soaks at 40 degrees Celsius to pretty much 67 centi-soaks at 40 degrees Celsius. I went with the Maxima Fork Oil 20, if you're wondering. And what those two things did was that it allowed the bike to behave a little bit more like an enduro bike or a motocross bike. It was really stable at front. It was able to handle the hard hits. If you were doing drops or a little jumps or going through consecutive blocks, you wouldn't be wandering with your bike all over the place. It made the bike really stable. And the fourth thing that I would recommend that you do to your bike if you want to enjoy off-road riding, it's changing the clutch lever. I'm not talking about the one on the handlebar, but I'm talking the one here that comes out right out of the clutch. I went with the Camel Adventure again. Camel Adventure one finger clutch kit. And what it does, again, it changes the leverage ratio. So you don't need much force in order to pull the clutch lever at the handlebar. So it makes it like much softer, and you could only do it with one finger. And the other thing that it does is that it increases the friction zone. So if you're riding at a technical rocky section and you're trying to control your clutch and not stall your bike, you are just originally the original clutch lever, the friction zone, it's so small that you're like, oh man, I'm not sure if this is the right amount of pull on my clutch, and if you pull it too much, you're disengaging the whole power, and if you don't pull at all, you are stalling your bike. So what it does, it increases that friction so you could really feather and control your clutch and go through technical terrain. And it's really, really necessary if you want to really enjoy your bike off-road riding. Yeah, this is a street bike, man. What Yamaha did was that they designed a bike with the purpose and the looks to go off-roading, but they equipped it with parts to go for the general audience. And the general public is gonna buy it to go ride on the street, to cruise, to go on adventures, but not to go on like enduro trails or single tracks or whatever. So if you want to take your Tenere 700 for a much more difficult kind of terrain or single tracks or hills or mountains or adventures, I would totally recommend this upgrades. Now, if we move into the second category, the not so necessary upgrades, we have pretty much three things. The high exhaust kit, crash bars, and skid plate. I've only done two of those, which are the crash bars and the high exhaust kit. The reason I went with this Camel Adventure exhaust, it's, again, I'm not sponsored by them. I just really like their stuff. The reason I went with this exhaust is because the original one comes in this direction. So if you fall, which you will, the main point of contact is going to be the exhaust, and what it does, it's going to bend the exhaust towards the inside of the bike. So you have two problems with that. The mounting bracket right here, it's part of the chassis, so you may break it. And the second thing is that the exhaust itself, it's from steel, stainless steel, and the swing arm, it's aluminum. So I don't know if you noticed yet, but if you drop your bike on the right side and you bend your exhaust towards the inside, you could see that the exhaust is on the way of the swing arm movement. So you're gonna end up scratching your swing arm, just like I did. I'm gonna show you some pictures. And if it's not so bad, you could continue. But if it's really bad and you don't notice, you could really do some damage to your swing arm. So you don't want that. So that's the reason I went with this high exhaust kit from Camel Adventure. And it sounds really good. And it looks good. It looks like a Dakar rally bike. The second optional upgrade that you could do to your bike is crash bars. If you have confidence in your riding, you probably don't need them, or if you feel like you're not gonna drop your bike, that's up to you. But I felt like I could drop my bike, so I got this really cheap out of Amazon. I'm gonna leave the link in the description below. And it only cost me $100. Most crash bars cost around 300 or 400 bucks US dollars. And I went with the cheap option because I'm cheap. The only problem though with these crash bars is that they're really good, but the hardware kit wasn't the appropriate one for this bike. So some bolts were larger, some were shorter, so I had to play around with some spacers in order to get them fit properly. And I did it myself, of course. And they have really saved my bike. I've dropped it like twice really hard, and I already bent the right crash bar, and I'm glad I bought them. Otherwise, I would have to buy this plastic thing on the side, and it's not cheap. I think it's around 200 bucks. So do yourself a favor and get some crash bars. The third thing that it's optional is the skid plate. I haven't quite made up my mind yet into changing it, because I don't think, for the kind of terrain that I'm riding and how hard I'm riding, I don't think it's necessary yet. If I'm doing a lot of hard enduro thing and going over rocks or logs or whatever, yeah, I would probably think about changing it, but I'm cool with the original one. So that's it. If you really want to enjoy your off-road riding with this bike, I would totally recommend these upgrades. They have changed my feeling about this bike. I don't feel like I wasted a lot of money on this. And this is now my partner for hardcore adventures. I'm your riding Paul Esteban, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Take care.